All right. What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. Kory, we're trying this again. How are we doing, though?
Doing good. We are back to doing live shows. I did this little spiel before, but no one could hear it. But we're doing it actually, and I think I'm being heard. We went to doing live shows, and we switched our software, so now we're back to doing live shows, talking NBA basketball. And Nick, it's always a pleasure.
It is always a pleasure. Hopefully, we can add some new, cool features to it. And as always, you can find the pod on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube. But Kory, let's get into All-Star talk. We didn't get to talk about it last time. Starters were announced. We'll start with the Western Conference. We got LeBron James, Anthony Davis, James Harden, Luka Doncic, and also Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool with the West. I think these are the five best players in the Western Conference. You can maybe obviously debate the order, but these have been the five best guys. If you want to make a point of emphasis on the fact that Kawhi hasn't played in all the Clippers games this year, sure, but these have been the best guys. So I got no qualms.
Yeah, no issues for me on the West side. But let's get to the East side. We got Joel Embiid, Pascal Siakam, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kemba Walker, and Trae Young.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where we saw the first bit of pushback from NBA Twitter and, a lot of people in OTG in particular. Is Trae Young actually an all-star? Or not is he an all-star? Is he an all-star starter is the better question. We often have a tough time debating, at least me personally, I have a tough time gauging how good a player is or how much value he brings to a team when he's playing in a bad situation. Devin Booker is probably the biggest example of this from the past several years of being on a bad team. It was kind of hard to gauge his talent level. I think Trae Young's in a similar situation now, being the primary ball handler, trying to do so much for that Atlanta Hawks offense. Is it just inflation or is he actually this good? Now, I do think he's this damn good, but I'm hesitant to say that he should actually be an all-star starter. I think he should have been a reserve, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it's very similar to Devin Booker's situation, like you mentioned with Phoenix, where he had all the success, all the numbers, but then, the team wasn't winning. It's the same thing with Trae Young. He's doing it, obviously, with a little bit more pop, averaging almost 30 points a game, almost 9 assists. It's really there stat-wise, but like you said, he's on one of the worst teams in the league, and one of our guys brought up KMT in the chat, is like, Trae is one of the top scorers in the fourth quarter in the NBA. Essentially, his team is down 20 or 15 most of the time in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. And actually, I don't have the stat. I wish I had prepared better for that. But I think there's a fourth quarter stat that also shows that the Atlanta Hawks are like the worst fourth quarter team in the NBA. Even though Trae Young may score a lot of points, by the point differential margin, they get blown out in the majority of their fourth quarters.
Yeah, and obviously that's nothing you want to see. Obviously, the East and the West, it's already set in stone in terms of the starters. They're not going to be necessarily on the same team. We have Captain LeBron, Captain Giannis. But let's talk reserves. You want to start with the West or the East?
We're in the East, so let's start with the East.
All right, who are you rolling with? Who are your locks? Do you have locks and then you have guys that maybe you're on the fence with?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a couple locks. I think I have 4 locks and then 3 guys who I have on the bubble. So I'll go with my locks. My locks are Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Bam Adebayo, and Domantas Sabonis. Those are my 4 locks. And then on the cusp, I have Chris Middleton, Jaylen Brown, Bradley Beal, Jason Tatum, Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, the East is actually a lot tougher than it seems. I definitely have Simmons locked in. I got Butler locked in, Bam locked in, Sabonis. And I feel like you almost got to lock in Chris Middleton after his last performance, that 50-point game, and without Giannis playing and just dominate. I mean, obviously, I think they play the Wizards, so it only kind of matters, but still, that was impressive stuff. And they're the best team in the league. They already have 40 wins. We saw a couple years ago that winning gets rewarded when the Hawks had, 4 All-Stars.
Yeah, I mean, the Atlanta Hawks had Jeff T, Kyle Korver, Millsap, and Horford all made it.
And so I'll just pause real quick on that, and you also could use that in the Trae Young argument, and people say winning doesn't matter for All-Stars. Then why did that team get 4 All-Stars? Because no disrespect to them, maybe 2 out of the 4 were actually All-Stars.
Right. No, that's a good point. I think Chris Middleton is probably the next lock I would put in. My real debate comes between what other Boston Celtic do I think deserves it? Is it Jason Tatum or is it Jaylen Brown? I think a lot of people on Twitter are leaning towards Tatum. I'm leaning towards Jaylen Brown personally. And then between Kyle Lowry and Bradley Beal, Bradley Beal, we know, is an all-star, but as you just mentioned, last night the Wizards gave up 150 points to that Milwaukee Bucks team. That is the fourth time this year that the Washington Wizards have given up 150 points or more this season. And then you add Kyle Lowry, and he's missed some time, but obviously the Toronto Raptors having such great success. The last two spots to me are extremely difficult for the East.
Yeah, I think I'm going to probably put Lowry in. I mean, Siakam got in, but Lowry's really been carrying that team when everyone's been injured. And he's averaging, I think, like 20 points a game, which is a lot for Kyle Lowry. And then between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, it's almost like, Jaylen Brown was really, really good early in the season. He's kind of cooled off a bit. Now Jason Tatum is starting to pick up a little bit more at this part of the season. So it's like, who do you go with there? Do you lean with who is more successful early, or you base it off of kind of now? I have the feeling that Jason Tatum's going to get in. He has a little bit more star pop, and I think Jaylen Brown's cooled off, and I'll probably go with Kyle Lowry as my last one.
I think I'm going to go with Middleton, Jaylen Brown, and Bradley Beal.
Bradley Beal?
I'll give Beal the nod, and I think Tatum and Lowry are the guys I'll have sit out, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lowry got in. I mean, it's obviously last night he just set the all-time franchise record for most assists for the Toronto Raptors, so salute to him. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and I mean, coaches kind of love Kyle Lowry. He's a winning player, so that kind of bodes well for him. Now, getting to the West, who are your locks? And before we get into locks and players, I know I'm personally probably going to exclude Paul George and Karl-Anthony Towns because they haven't played enough games. Are you going to exclude them or no?
Well, I don't have either one of them making the All-Star game.
Okay, well, there we go. So we don't have to worry about it. But who are your locks then in the West?
I mean, I actually didn't have to even put down like a substitute. Like, these are my guys. They're all locks for me at this point. That's Chris Paul, Nikola Jokic, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Brandon Ingram, Damian Lillard, and then Devin Booker. Those are my 7 guys. I think Ingram and Booker would be the 2 guys I could see not making it, but I don't see Lillard missing it. I don't see Chris Paul after the year he's having missing it. Jokic is obviously going to have the huge Denver fan base. Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell have just been dominant for the Jazz over this past 2 months or so. So I just can't see those guys missing it. And Ingram, as we know, I mean, he's just been on a tear all year. Obviously, the last couple games with Zion, his numbers have dipped a little bit, but that's to be expected. They got to try and figure out how to play everybody together in New Orleans. And then Lillard, just like the name, I just can't imagine Lillard missing it, especially when he's been healthy all year. And then Booker, it just almost feels like this is the year that, if Trae Young's going to be a starter in the East, I'm going to be disappointed if Devin Booker doesn't get an all-star nod in the West.
No, this is going to be super exciting, but I have the same exact guys for the Western Conference.
Same, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get that crazy because you remember so many guys are also out. 2 almost automatic locks for the All-Star game, and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are injured. We mentioned Karl-Anthony Towns. If he's healthy this season, he's probably in. I wouldn't be completely surprised if he ended up getting in, but his team's also been losing a lot of games, and just feels like I haven't seen Paul George play basketball in a long time.
Yeah, Paul George obviously missing so much time to start the year, recovering from his shoulder surgery, and then I don't even know what he's missing with a hamstring right now. Is that what he has?
I feel like he's just been banged up all types of season.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where some games he's injured, then other games it seems like it's almost load management because he's trying to get back from injury, so all over the place.
And I also want to say, I also don't think Towns makes it because I don't think 3 centers make the reserves.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
The fact that Jokic, Gobert, and Towns all making it, I just don't see that happening. And not that this should be in the minds of voter or coaches and stuff. But Rudy Gobert missing it last year and him crying and being emotional, winning Defensive Player of the Year again, and never having an All-Star under his belt. I think it's almost just coaches are going to want to reward him and say we do understand and notice the value you bring to the NBA court.
100%, and obviously the defense is there, and the Jazz have been so good at this point they kind of deserve 2 All-Stars.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline marathon. Start off with our guy Matt Esposito, trade between the Celtics and the Nuggets. We got the Celtics receiving Malik Beasley, the Nuggets getting Poirier, Javonte Green, and a first-round pick. Kory, thoughts on this one? And the first-round pick is via Milwaukee.
So the Celtics steal a sneaky bench score is what we're going with. If they're making this deal, I really believe this is a bigger deal in which we see Gordon Hayward moved in this hypothetical world. I don't dislike it. Malik Beasley has been a solid performer for the Denver Nuggets, can provide some pop. The Celtics don't necessarily need I'm not going to be able to say Poirier's name correctly, but I just tried anyways.
I don't think that was too bad.
What happened?
I don't think that was too bad.
Okay, well, that's decent. That's improvement. And then a round one, like I actually almost think, I mean, that first round pick isn't going to be overly solid because Milwaukee is so good. So I mean, I guess it's fair. I just think this would be a move where the Celtics are now looking to move one of their bigger contracts off the books.
Well, also Malik Beasley, give him some scoring punch. I believe he's a restricted free agent entering the summer, so it's kind of they have control of him, but they want to re-sign him or not. And I think it just gives him some pop to the bench. I don't know if this kind of makes him a contender, makes him that much higher in the East, but it might give them an advantage in a first or maybe even a second round playoff series, just having a little bit more bench depth, especially a scorer. Moving on, though, we're going to deal with the Clippers and the Bulls. Dalton getting back in the action. Clippers receive Thaddeus Young and Denzel Valentine. Chicago receives Mo Harkless, Jerome Robinson, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name. That's why we're doing the Periscope, so you can see it yourself.
This is a good trade, I think, for the Los Angeles Clippers. Denzel Valentine has shown some offensive pop off the bench, can play either the 2 or the 3. Still young under contract. Harkless, getting rid of him if you're the Clippers, like he's a solid 3-and-D guy, but just doesn't provide much offensive upside. Thaddeus Young will give you just as much defense, if not more defense, than Mo Harkless. This is also a very good locker room guy. This is also a guy who can rebound at a decently high click as well. Has gotten better at the 3-point shot. I don't think he's having great success this season in Chicago, but I know he shot around 34% with the Pacers. So he can knock down some shots. You just don't want to rely on it. And again, on this Clippers team, they wouldn't be asking Thaddeus Young to do anything much offensively. They'd be asking him to do the gritty little scrappiness that he brings to the court. And then the Bulls, they just get some nice youth. I mean, this is, I think, a really good move for the Clippers if they want to try and add another forward to their mix, because they do rely a little bit too much on Montrezl Harrell.
Yeah, Thaddeus Young gives him more of an interior presence, I guess. He's more of an actual true power forward than a stretch forward. Gives you a little bit of toughness, gives you that hustle. Like you mentioned, offensively, you're not necessarily gaining a ton. I would say he's probably a better finisher inside than Mo Harkless. But other than that, it's taking that little step forward, but that's all the Clippers really need. So I wouldn't hate this move on their part. And they're not giving away, a first-round pick, or at least they're giving away a drafted first-round pick in Cavangeli.
Yeah.
And on to our next trade, we're going to Charles Allen. Charles is keeping things spicy. We got the Warriors, we got the Sixers. We got the Warriors receiving Tobias Harris, Atlanta's 2020 second-round pick, New York's 2021 second-round pick, and then Philly receives D'Angelo Russell, Kevon Looney, and Alec Burks.
I actually like this trade. It's bigger names in it, obviously. The 76ers have an interesting predicament in their hands in the fact that they're just very big. They could use some guard scoring. D'Angelo Russell could be that guard. Doesn't necessarily, playing alongside Ben Simmons, playing alongside Josh Richardson, Joel Embiid, Al Horford. They can hide him on defense, which has been his issue. He's a defensive liability. But then you're adding a guy in who can create his own shot. He can facilitate for others. Then Alec Burks off the bench as a scoring punch, not bad. Kevon Looney, having a third center, not a terrible play. Now when Joel Embiid is out for rest, you also have Looney, who can also take some of that pressure off Al Horford, who's definitely getting older. And then the Warriors, instead of having to worry about having 3 guards playing, you can have another forward in Tobias Harris. I like this move for both sides. If the Warriors wanted to move off D'Angelo Russell and get a player who's ready to ball now and is a very good player, doesn't necessarily, not a high ego guy by any means, can kind of just slide into what they're looking for alongside Curry, Clay, and Draymond, this could work for both sides.
Yeah, I really like it for both teams. I think it honestly puts, the Sixers in possible contention this season and Golden State in contention next season. You mentioned D'Angelo Russell would have a ball running around screens for, Al Horford and Joel Embiid. And defensively, he has some protection when playing with Horford, Embiid, and Ben Simmons. I think that would really work. His 3-point shot is kind of taking that next step. And you mentioned Kevon Looney, too. Gives you a nice insurance and policy with Joel Embiid. They also like to play 2 bigs. They like to play Al Horford and Joel Embiid together. So Looney will fit right in. He knows how to play without the ball playing in Golden State. Alec Burks, he's done his thing, gives you some nice bench depth. And then Golden State next year, I think Tobias Harris is just a better fit on that team. And he's a guy that could operate, I think, for the Warriors without having the ball a ton. Or if he does have the ball, he could pass it out to Steph and Clay. Their spacing would be super ideal. Not that Tobias Harris, I think, is the best shooting forward in the league. He's no Kevin Durant, but he's definitely a good shooter.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting. I mean, I don't know that we'd see this trade because teams make so many trades for right now, and I'm not sure if Golden State would really buy into this or just wait to see what they can get, or if they're not in love with Tobias Harris's contract. But on to our next trade, we got Cam back in action. Celtics and Wizards. We got the Celtics receiving Davis Bertans, Isaiah Thomas. The Wizards receiving Vincent Poirier, Brandon Wanamaker, and a 2020 first-round pick via the Celtics.
This is a Boston Celtics favored trade by a long shot. Obviously, Isaiah Thomas has already won and over and owns the heart of Boston Celtics fans for his tenure with the Celtics. Davis Bertans would be the perfect kind of stretch four for this team, looking for some more offense. I don't know why the Wizards do this trade, though. I think they can get way more value for Davis Bertans right now. Maybe not as much for Isaiah Thomas. I'm not sure what his value is right now. I mean, he's producing at a solid amount, but again, a liability defensively. Clearly isn't the same player he was, 2-3 years ago. I think the Wizards would want more than Brad Wanamaker and a draft pick for Bertans and Isaiah Thomas. Maybe you could get one of the two, but I don't think you could get both.
Yeah, I think, the Wizards would probably want them to swap out, Wanamaker for another young player that they have. Maybe a Romeo Langford or somebody like that, or even Semi Ojeleye, just something. And then probably throw in a second-round pick or a more attractive first-round pick, because the way Boston's playing, it's probably going to be a late first.
Right. That's another good point.
So moving on from there, we got two more trades. Khalil had a little bit of fun with this one. This obviously isn't super impactful on the court. It's more so for the fans. Atlanta receives Malcolm Miller. Toronto receives Vince Carter. Vince obviously returns back to Toronto. Has a chance to have some playoff success. Probably not a championship, but he ends his career where he started it.
I mean, it'd be a feel-good story. Vince Carter going back to Toronto, having some sort of playoff run before his career ends after he retires. I don't see necessarily why the Hawks would hold him hostage. More so, I think there's just a misconception of the fact that, Vince Carter's relationship with the Toronto Raptors didn't end gracefully.
Yeah.
Vince Carter did force his way out of Toronto after being unhappy.
To New Jersey.
Right. So I'm not necessarily sure that the Raptors themselves would want Vince Carter back. I mean, granted, we're talking about something that happened, 15 years ago. So I don't think there's as much bad blood as there might have been, 2 years after. But it's a feel good story. But also, I think I saw a lot of people, or at least a couple of people, react to this by saying, Vince Carter isn't considered like a Toronto Raptor legend because of how he ended his tenure. He's considered one of their better players, but not one of their legends.
Especially the way his career ended and forcing the trade out. And I mean, I think there's probably an argument he played, maybe some of his best basketball in New Jersey. He wasn't quite as athletic, but he was, more of a scorer and was relied upon differently. But moving on to our last trade for today. Like we mentioned on previous shows, we've teamed up with TradeNBA.com, delivering trade proposals every day leading up to the deadline. And our man Charles is getting fun. He's got another interesting trade. Phoenix receives Karl Anthony Towns. Minnesota receives DeAndre Ayton, Tyler Johnson, first-round picks in 2020, 2022, and 2024. So we're getting Cat in Phoenix to play with his boy Devin Booker. Timberwolves are coming away with DeAndre Ayton, salary filler, and Tyler Johnson, and 3 first-round picks.
So it's interesting. Obviously, this is to context this too, which makes this even more interesting. Karl Anthony Towns, after they blew the lead to Sacramento a couple nights ago, was very short and clearly upset with the current situation going on in Minnesota. We predicted this at some point last year, where I think I said 2 years or 3 years he'll be demanding a trade. We're like on a fast track to that. Becoming a reality. This Minnesota team just doesn't win. If you want to make Towns happy, he's going to want to play with one of his boys. His boys are D'Angelo Russell and Devin Booker. And, lucky for the Phoenix Suns is they have draft picks and they have a very young DeAndre Ayton, who has 4 years still under his contract and his rookie contract. He's going to be locked up for the foreseeable future regardless. Tyler Johnson's expiring, so they could bring in a young piece to still pair with Andrew Wiggins and actually have more cap flexibility going forward to add someone else into the mix, maybe a piece or two, so they start competing again. This is almost just like a doomsday scenario for Towns wanting out. I don't think you ever want to trade a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, of course. But the Suns, this puts them on the fast track to being probably a lock to be a playoff team in the West. And then Timberwolves, you're not making out for nothing. You're getting a very young center back in DeAndre Ayton. Who knows what he may become?
Yeah, I think if I'm Phoenix in this trade, or if I'm actually Minnesota in this trade, I'm asking for probably one more young piece. Maybe it's Bridges or something, sending him over, or another better pick, or just some type of asset. I think it's just a little bit short of being enough for Karl Anthony Towns. Obviously, if you lose leverage, that's the type of trade you might have to deal with. But I think they could have done a lot worse, and I think Cat would be pretty happy in Phoenix.
I think Cat would be very excited playing along a top scorer in Booker, having Ricky Rubio. They have a history together as well from their Minnesota days. Yeah, I mean, it's warmer too, right? I think that's the one knock against Minnesota is that it's not very warm.
Exactly. Not necessarily a ton to do. But I'm going to pass it over to you, Kory, for Believe It or Not, because I know you have an event to attend. Victor Oladipo makes his return tonight. We're not going to talk about it because we'll wait to see him play on the court, but I know you're excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited. It's going to be the best 24 minutes of my life, sporadically placed throughout the evening. So, believe it or not. So we're going to go through some believe it or nots. Basically, I give a stat, and we just say, do we believe it or not? First up, and this is, I had to throw this one out there because of the Pacer Heat connection. Jimmy Butler is shooting 9.5% from three since Christmas. Just 24.5% on the season. Nick, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, this was a hot topic in the OTG group chat last night, debating if Jimmy Butler is overrated. I don't think he's overrated, but I do believe his three-point shot is questionable. But he's been able to work without it all season long, so I think it's fine. But I believe the stat that he's probably not going to be a good three-point shooter this season.
Yeah, this is from StatMuse as well, by the way. They always post some good stats. One more from StatMuse. So, the Milwaukee Bucks are first in defense and second in offense. There are only three other teams with the top two offensive and defensive ratings in the three-point era, and they all won championships. The 95-96 Bulls, 2014-2015 Warriors, 2016-2017 Golden State Warriors. Believe it or not.
I mean, the Bucks are a really, really good team. Like, I think it gets undersold how good of an actual team they are, and not just Giannis. We just talked about it a little bit earlier. Chris Middleton dropped 50. They dropped 150 points. They're a very good team, well coached. They know what they're doing. They know their roles. I really like them to get to the finals. I'm not willing to lock them in as a champion. I think I'm leaning towards the Lakers at the moment. That was my pick early on. I'll probably stick with it.
I think that's fair. Now, I got two more. These come from NBA.com. These are our 5-player lineups. The best defensive rating lineup in the NBA today that's played 321 minutes together is Chris Paul, Gallinari, Steven Adams, Terrence Ferguson, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That is the best 5-man defensive rated team currently in the NBA.
Man, I mean, the stats are there. That's a good sample size. I think you have to believe it. It is surprising, especially considering Gallinari's in there. Steven Adams is the rim protector. Shai and Terrence Ferguson are kind of...
Oh, wait. Nah, that's the worst.
That's the worst?
That's the worst defensive lineup in the NBA.
That's surprising. I mean, with Chris Paul and Steven Adams and then two athletic wings, I guess Gallinari's not great, defensively.
The only reason I know it's the worst is because the number 2 team underneath it is Isaiah Thomas, Bradley Beal, and I know that they're number 2. It definitely ain't a good defense.
Oh, God. Well, I believe that they are bad, I guess, then. I was going to try to make a point why they're good, but no.
Yeah. So, but now, and I got confused. I got 2 of these. So now the best 5-man offensive lineup in the NBA, this one is accurate, is Chris Paul, Gallinari, Dennis Schroeder, Steven Adams, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now that, to me, makes a lot more sense because Schroeder has been a 6-man of the year contender at this point.
Yeah, their 3-guard lineup has been really good for them. They're putting out Shai, they're putting out Schroeder, and they're putting out CP3. And offensively, they're just doing things. They can attack you, and the guys are feeling confident shooting. And everyone's really just having a nice year. It just feels like there's not a lot of pressure in OKC right now, and guys are just playing ball.
And now I want to give you the third best offensive rated lineup right now because I think this one's interesting because of the debates. Al Horford, Tobias Harris, James Ennis, Ben Simmons, and Korkmaz is the third best offensive rating lineup. Believe it or not.
I mean, I do believe it because you can watch the Sixers and you can see the difference. And it just makes Ben Simmons from being a very good top 50 type player to probably being like a top 15 to a top maybe borderline 10 when there's no Embiid on the floor because of the way he attacks. Where when Embiid's in there, Simmons can't really drive to the rim. And if you're thinking about it, Simmons is similar to Giannis in the extent in LeBron, where most defenders aren't going to be able to handle him one-on-one on a drive unless it's, a center or a power forward. So I think it allows Simmons to be that much better. And obviously you surround a player who can get to the rim with a lot of shooters, they're going to have success.
For sure. Now, and one more lineup-based question, because I had fun with these today, just looking at the lineups. There's only one team in the NBA that has a positive net rating with 4 or more. Oh, no. Wait, what was it? Oh, no. Best net rating with only one starter on the floor surrounded by bench players. And that's the Indiana Pacers. Justin Holiday, Doug McDermott, TJ McConnell, Sabonis, and Aaron Holiday is the best lineup in the NBA featuring just one starter out there with bench players.
I mean, I find it interesting, but it kind of just goes with the Pacers vibe in terms of like team basketball they've been playing all season. And I think the talent differential, obviously Victor Oladipo hasn't been playing. He's been injured. He's going to come back. Miles Turner isn't having a great season. He's been in and out of the lineup. I think the talent differential maybe between the starters and the bench isn't as crazy as some other teams might have it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Now, one more, and this is directed about the Milwaukee Bucks, more so Chris Middleton. We kind of mentioned how he played the other night, getting 51 points. On the season, Chris Middleton's averaging 20.2 points per game, 5.9 rebounds per game, 3.9 assists per game, shooting splits of 50, 43, and 90. Without Giannis Antetokounmpo in 4 games, the Bucks are 4-0, and Middleton averages 29.8 points per game, 7.0 rebounds, 6.0 assists, 1 steal on shooting splits of 52, 48, 100. He's been 19 of 19 from the free throw line. Believe it or not.
No, I don't believe it. It's an outlier. We saw Chris Middleton not be able to do anything last year in the playoffs, and Giannis needed every bit of him, and he wasn't there. So I think it's just like 4 games, against the Wizards, no disrespect, doesn't really count. I'm sure some of the other ones are bad teams. And like I said, Milwaukee's a good team by itself. Even if Giannis wasn't on that team, they'd be a playoff team in the East.
Right. No, I think that's fair.
So,
and that's going to wrap it up for this week's Believe It or Not.
All right. Well, that was our first live show in a long time. We'll get back to it, back in rhythm. And like we said, we got some new features for you. But Kory, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
A shout out, a little bit on a downer note, but shout out to the Inside the NBA crew for TNT. I think last night the conversation that they had about Kobe Bryant, having Dwayne Wade come on board, Shaq showing so much emotion, Jerry West coming out showing so much emotion. I almost felt like an NBA league-wide therapy session. I feel like a lot of diehard fans needed that. I feel like those guys in particular who actually knew Kobe and like those players needed that. It was one of the real touching moments that we've had. Obviously, we're dealing with a tragedy in the loss of Kobe Bryant, but I thought everything that the Inside the NBA did last night, we may joke and mock them about how they may not know, a player's name or know who a player's on this team or that team. But when it came to something so tough and grieving as last night, they handled it as best as anyone could, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you give them a lot of credit. I tried not to mention Kobe the whole show because I don't want to cry on live stream.
Yeah.
But we obviously did our episode Monday, but it was great. It was relieving, and I think one thing that's been like so hurtful and making everyone so sad is obviously the loss of Kobe Bryant and the GG and the 7 other passengers, but also seeing so many NBA players and role models and idols they had also hurting, where it's not just like, you look to the NBA because you kind of want to get away from real life things. And then when you're seeing like it everywhere with everything NBA, and then like your favorite player is now hurting, like it just makes you feel a certain way. And it's not something I feel like that's gonna go away. It's gonna linger this entire season in a sad way, but that's the type of impact Kobe had.
For sure.
And on that note, we are gonna get out of here. Big thanks as always, Kory. Thank you everybody for listening. Find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube.
Peace out.